Hello everybody, the sound should be fixed right now. On this stream actually, I had a small technical issue, but it should be alright. Let me know if you have any sound issue, I'll try to fix them. I'm gonna wait a little bit till there is more people joining the stream, and I'm gonna start actually the live, which will be all about giving you some Blender tips and tricks regarding any topics actually. So I'm gonna read the chat, I'm gonna see what you want me to show you, and also I'm going to give you some tips that you may not know, you may know. We are going to see some things related to modeling, related to maybe rigging, animation, and different things that are already integrated in Blender in the form of add-ons, and that you may not be aware of, that can help you a lot during your process. So this is the actual plan. But I'm going to wait a little bit for more people to join us. And feel free to say hi in the chat and to comment, to ask some questions in the chat already that I will be able to answer later on. This is one of the rare live that I think I'm gonna put on the channel. Usually when I'm doing some lives, it's more lives where I do sketches and things like that without any audio, but in this context it's more a live tutorial if you want. So I think I'm gonna let it on the channel this time. I'm gonna start as usual. What I used to do in the past, I used to wait for 20 people to join the stream in order to start, so that's exactly what I'm doing for now. And we are going to deep dive into the topics soon. I'm gonna just add that on the on the text in the viewport. And by the way, just because we are using a text there, just showing you that if you right click you can extrude the text already. That's a small feature. You don't have to generate the mesh in edit mode like as a mesh and go in edit mode and extrude the thing, or use a solidify modifier over there. You can already extrude some texts using the right click object context menu there. And of course here you have tons of options regarding text, and we're not going to dive into text in Blender because that's not the most appealing features, and that's quite obvious. The different features are quite obvious, but we're gonna deep dive mainly I think into modelization features, modeling features, sorry, and probably animation and rigging. We're gonna see according to what the chat wants actually. Just if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to use Blender 2.1 I think, which is the last stable release of Blender. So feel free to download it if you don't have it and install it. And I think I'm close to the factory setup. If you want to be sure of that, you can go to File, and you can go in defaults and load factory settings in order to have a fresh new version of Blender if you want regarding the settings. And I just added the shortcut VUR add-on in order for you to see the shortcuts that I'm going to press in the lower right corner of the screen, of the viewport actually, not the screen. And that's how you will be able to, if I'm going too fast, that's how you're going to be able to see what I'm doing. But of course, don't hesitate to stop me. I have the chat on a second monitor. I will be reading it from time to time. So if there's something that's very strange to you, like something that I've done that looks strange to you, or you don't understand it, like please write it in the chat so I'm aware of it and I will be re-explaining it. Again, feel free to say hi in the chat. Yeah, I think, don't worry, I think I'm gonna make it available right after the live. I actually don't know if I'm gonna edit the live or just let YouTube put it on the channel. We'll see. Hello, welcome. I think the live will last probably 1 hour and a half or something like that. I don't have a very clear plan. It's going to be mainly improvisation. Usually the tips that I'm going to share with you are tips that I'm sharing with my friends and my colleagues. It's going to be like mainly workflow oriented, like things that make you efficient with Blender, and then click as few buttons as possible. So if you watched some of my tutorials on the channel, you know that I am trying to be as fast as possible with the software, because I don't like to have my flow being broken, basically. So I really like to use shortcuts. I really like to go as fast as possible with it. So over the years I developed some habits regarding some feature settings and things that help me to be a bit faster. And I mainly use Blender Vanilla, so I'm not going to show you a lot of add-ons that I bought, because that's not the goal of this live. I think that with Blender Vanilla you can do already like the vast majority of things that you can imagine regarding your projects. So it's not like I like the vast majority of add-ons that you have on the market are add-ons that are workflow oriented, I would say. Basically they don't bring new extraordinary features. They just combine different features that already exist in Blender. If you want like very impressive features, either you have to write an add-on with an external process that will do the thing that will compute the expensive thing that you want to do, and usually that's not Python, and or you directly like code for Blender and create a new version of Blender with the feature. Hello, welcome to the stream. Hello, what I do for a living. I'm actually creating some video games. Programming and art and tech art. Only one left, exactly. Oh, we had a 5 viewers drop. I hope they will come back. And sorry for the French people, I'm not going to speak French. A lot of French people are following me because I'm French, in case you didn't hear that. And in the past, a few years ago, I decided to switch the language of this channel in order to reach more people and to help more people around the world, because English is the world language basically. So I apologize in advance if I do small syntactic error mistakes and things like that, but I hope you will still be able to understand what I'm saying and understand like the concepts that I want to share with you. Hello, welcome to the stream. We're soon gonna start, I hope so. Okay, I think we're 20, which means that we can start this live. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you is not very fun. It's actually how I set up my Blender. So usually when I start from scratch a new Blender project or a new fresh install of Blender, I'm putting different preferences that I really like because from my point of view, they are making my my flow in the software very fast, like compared to other things that I've tested before, and here they are. So basically, usually I don't go into preferences by going to File or Edit Preferences. I really like this shortcut, which is the F4 shortcut. And in Blender, when you press F4, you have this file context menu that pops right under your mouse, which is like very cool because you don't have to go on the top of your UI, and especially if you work with bigger screens, it can be painful. So F4, and as you can see in Blender, and that's the really nice thing from the software, each time you open a file menu in the context of the viewport, for instance, or in a context, you can see that Blender puts the last option that you've hovered under your cursor. So that's very, very nice. Like for instance here, you can see when I'm, for instance, going to press append, I press F4 again, and now I'm already set up as append. So usually I go to the preferences of Blender by pressing F4 in preferences. It's for me very fast. And here in the preferences, usually the first thing I'm starting with is to go in the input section, and I check this checkbox, which is called emulate 3-button mouse. This enables me to navigate using the Alt key instead of the middle mouse button that I don't think is very practical for my index finger actually. So I prefer to navigate with the Alt key. And you can see that even the shortcuts over there is like thinking that I'm using the middle mouse button, so it's just a fake shortcut if you want. And also the cool thing is that I can navigate using the Shift key plus the Alt key. So if I do that, I'm gonna pan, and Control and Alt, I can zoom in and out. Usually I still zoom with the mouse wheel. Okay, that's a thing that I'm pretty used to with other softwares too. But the Alt key is quite neat. And the very neat thing with that is that if you are using a tablet, for instance for sculpting or for doing like animation, 2D animation, or even modeling, the neat thing with that is that you don't have to set up the middle mouse button sorry, of your tablet, of your stylus, in order to navigate. So that's a very good point for the Alt navigation. I know it can be painful if you're used to the other navigation, but if you can switch for that, you're gonna have other things that will help you. For instance, like if you're in sculpt mode and you press Ctrl and Alt over your sculpt, it's a very easy way to actually zoom in and out using a stylus. So I really encourage you to try that. Okay. So F4 preferences, we go to emulate 3-button mouse, that's the first option. Then the things that usually I do by default is I go to the add-on section and I enable those add-ons. So the first one is F2. Okay, if you don't have it enabled, I really encourage you to do that. So F2 is an add-on that when you are in edit mode enables you to generate faces in a very cool way. So here I've put the 3D cursor, so the spawn, if you want, the spawn location of objects using the shift and right click shortcut. I can place it where I want, or I can press Shift C in order to bring it back to the center, and Shift A in order to add an object. So I'm going to add an object, which is a plane, and I'm going to press Tab in order to go in edit mode. I really encourage you to not go in the menus over there. You're going to spend a lot of time of your art time, or I would say like your physical time, to click in menus if you do that. So I really encourage you to get into the habit of pressing shortcuts. You will be even more focused to what you are going to create, which is actually in the end what we want to do. Is we want to create and not spend our time in like fighting against the software. So pressing Tab is the shortcut in order to switch between the first mode and the second mode. And why I'm not saying object mode and edit mode is that because it's context sensitive, and it reminds Blender remembers the last mode you were in. So if I was in sculpt mode, for instance, and press Tab, you can see that I'm going back to edit mode and back to sculpt mode. Okay, so if I go back to object mode and press Tab, I go back between object mode and edit mode. Okay. The other shortcut for that is pressing Ctrl Tab, which brings you this pie menu. And the pie menus in Blender are quite useful, but in order to make them fast, because again, pressing Ctrl Tab, waiting, clicking is not as fast as possible. If you want to use the pie menus as fast as possible in your workflow, you can do a gesture. And this gesture is like you just open the menu, and while you're in the menu, in the first few milliseconds of the opening of the menu, you can go in the direction of the option, like a swipe if you want, and you will enter the mode. So for instance, if I want to go in edit mode from this mode, I can press Ctrl Tab and swipe to the right, which is something that's quite useful. And again, if I want to go to object mode, I can swipe to the left. I don't think that doing gestures with the mouse is the ideal thing, so that's for me obviously more in terms of UX, in terms of user experience. That's more designed for me for a tablet, but it's still doable anyway. So when switching between object mode and edit mode, usually I press only Tab, and for the more like the less used modes, usually I'm pressing Ctrl Tab and going. For instance, if I want to do vertex painting, I go up because I know already that it's up. And this you will have to remember it. It's like muscle memory, and also like like you have to remember where your modes are when you're doing gestures. But trust me, in the end you will spend like you will earn a lot of time. You will like gain a lot of time. Sorry. So coming back to the F2 add-on that we just enabled. If you don't know about this one, it's a very, very neat add-on that enables you to generate face on the fly. So you probably know that in Blender you can, let me select those two edges. You probably know that you can, and extrude it, you probably know that you can select some points and press F in order to fill a face. That's the standard shortcut of Blender. This works with like either 2 vertices or 3 vertices, or even 2 vertex in order to generate an edge. Okay, so this is how we bridge stuff in Blender instead of using the bridge method from other software. So if I go in edge mode by pressing the 2 key, selecting this edge, shift, selecting this edge, you can press right click and you have the bridge edge loop method, which I absolutely don't recommend to use because it's very slow. So you press just F and you're good to go. But as you can see, if I don't have the F2 add-on enabled, and I'm, for instance, in this current situation, and I want to generate a quad that looks like this, if I want to do this, for whatever reason, and sorry about today, I'm not going to do very nice things regarding art. It's not a art live, it's an art live, sorry, it's a tech live. But in this context here, if I select this vertex, I press F, you can see it only generates a triangle, which can be useful in some cases, but the F2 add-on, actually, if you enable it, will give you the possibility to generate a quad like this. And you also have to validate your location. So if I want the default location, I can press right click or escape in order to cancel the operator in the middle. And if I don't want, if I want to tweak it, I can, of course, tweak it like this. The neat thing also in Blender is that that's a small shortcut. You can press Shift when you are moving something or you are changing the value of a slider or a numerical value, and this will divide your speed by 2. So you can be even more precise like this. Okay. So again, the Shift key while you are doing something in Blender like divides the speed of your mouse by not by 2, but like by a factor. I don't know exactly the factor, but if you want to be more precise, that's something nice. And of course, left click to validate. So also the cool thing with the F2 add-on, if I'm going to, let's extrude some piece like this. If I want, for instance, here to generate a face, you will see that it's already being set up in a direction that's close to this orientation in space. Okay, so that's a quite interesting thing. So if you want to generate add-on in free space, I will say that's a good idea. I'm using this add-on a lot for instance, if I want to start, let's say, a face. Let's say I'm modeling something like that. By the way, using the emulate 3-button mouse button options that we set up in the input section over there, I can double click on the edge, on an edge in order to select it, which is faster than pressing Alt and right click, which is not, Alt and left click, which is not even available in this mode. So double click is the shortcut. So let's say that I'm in this situation. Let's say I'm doing a very crappy thing, but just for demonstration purposes. Okay, let's say that in this context I'm setting the loops of my face. I can, for instance, extrude the mask over there. And if you don't know how to do exactly what I'm doing, you can follow an old tutorial that I've done regarding character base mesh modeling on the channel. So I can do something like that. And for instance, here in this context, I can generate the face for the inside by pressing F in order to have something, or even, you know what, even like this. I can extrude, for instance, here for the bridge of the nose, and here selecting the corner over there, pressing F2 in order to generate the face. And you can see that the face is already being extruded inside, which is nice. And one thing to remember is that you always have to select the vertex in the angle of the existing topology in order to generate that. Oh, maybe I can reduce the volume because my voice apparently is saturated. Is it better like this? Do you hear me better? I hope so. I'm sorry about that. So, and of course, like in this situation, using the F2 add-on is not the best, because here I will directly extrude for the eyes the geometry, and I will already have this loop, which is like much better. But anyway, I think you get the idea of this add-on. So let's come back with a plane. A nice shortcut to know if you don't know it already is the dot key on your numpad in order to focus on your selection. So let's say I want to focus on this selection, I can press the dot key, the numpad dot key, and I will be there, focusing there. And one other thing in order to focus an object that I really like is the Shift B shortcut. So maybe you don't know about this one, but the Shift B shortcut enables you to drag a small box like this, and you will zoom in this box, and you will be in the context of this box, and the camera will zoom to it. And this can be very useful if you want to be in very closed area. So let's say I'm there, I'm in this situation, I'm gonna close this. Let me add a shortcut, a short loop here. Okay, I'm in this situation, and I need to enter into this box, which is quite a nightmare. So the first thing, I would say the same things to do will be to press H, select those faces and press H in order to remove them. But let's say for whatever reason you still want to keep those faces, okay? Because you need to. It's the inside of a mouse. You are in a sculpt and you cannot select, for instance, the faces. So you can press the Shift B, and you can see that with Shift B I'm inside the geometry, and it collides actually with the geometry, which is quite nice because honestly that's a nightmare to go in this setup with with some other shortcuts, okay, while keeping the geometry. So Shift B enables you to go in very close area. So this one I'm using it a lot, especially from mouth cavity when I'm creating a character in sculpt mode, for instance, or in those sort of situations. So one thing regarding edit mode that's actually quite nice, and I discovered that quite late actually, is the fact that you can press Shift on those icons there and have multiple type of geometry selected. So here, if I press, for instance, faces plus vertices using Shift, I can actually move vertices, but I can also select faces, which is quite neat if I want to if I want to be in a multi-selected mode. So those sort of things can help you and also can trick you in sometimes. So I mainly stay with the component that I know I want to manipulate, but sometimes when I'm modeling very freely and doing some, I would say, more or less garbage modeling in order to set up a scene quickly, this can be useful. Okay. Again, the shortcuts are 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3 above the QWERTY keys, or AZERTY if you're in France, or using a keyboard that starts with an A instead of the Q. and you will be able to quickly change your geometry like this, your component type actually like this. So one other thing regarding components is that you have options that are very specific to the type of component you're currently selecting. And by the way, you can also press Shift and 1 and 2 and 3 in order to multi-select, as you can see there. So I can stay still over there, having nothing to click, okay, which is very nice. I can press Shift and 1, and I don't have to move my mouse on the top, which is something that I try to avoid because I want really to focus on what actually I'm doing. So as you can see over there, as I was mentioning, sorry, there are some options that are actually only available with some component types. So let's say that I want to subdivide this piece of geometry. I can right click and subdivide. If I want to access the options of the subdivision operator, basically tools in Blender or options or features, if you want, the vast majority of features are called operators, and operators for the vast majority of them have options. And you can always find the options of the last operator that you've used in the lower left corner of the screen, or by pressing the F9 shortcut. So it's exactly the same window as you can see. So here I can subdivide, and I can also use the smoothness if I want, or let's say I just want to subdivide for now. Okay. So I've subdivided this piece of geometry, and there is an option in the right-click context menu for vertex. You can see that I'm in the vertex context menu, okay, and this does not exist in the face. For instance, if I press 3 in order to go in face context menu, you can see I don't have some options that are available in the vertex. And in the vertex here, I have the smooth vertices operator. So if I press this option, you can see that it smooths the geometry. And if I press Shift R, I can repeat the last operator that I've used. So that's one way to repeat the smoothness. Another way is, of course, to use the repeat operator over there, the repeat feature of the operator, or the smoothing aspect. I don't think you can overshoot. Yes, you can overshoot up to 10, but usually that's not a super good idea. You can see it creates some artifacts, so it's better to repeat the operation. And you can also decide on which axis you want to smooth, which is quite neat actually. Helps you in hard surface modeling in some cases, so keep that in mind. And the thing that's very hard in terms of UX point of view is that sometimes you really want to smooth while you're in face mode, and you cannot, unfortunately. As for, let's say I want to smooth only this edge loop or only this piece of geometry. Okay, so in order to do that, the neat thing is that you can right click on any option in Blender and add it to your quick favorite menu or add a shortcut. So in this context, what I've done is the smooth vertex, I've added it in the quick favorite menu. So here it proposed me to remove it, but you can add it, of course, by default. And if I press Q, you can see that I have the smooth vertex option over there. So it works while I'm in vertex mode, but also while I'm in edge mode, and also while I'm in face mode. Okay, so that's nice because usually I don't want to switch the component type that I'm in. So let's say I'm selecting this, I can press Q and smooth quite quickly and Shift R in order to repeat. And I can quickly relax, for instance, some topology like this. So let's say I want to do a sushi for whatever reason. I can do that now. I'm taking, for instance, the rest of this topology, selecting a few vertices, pressing Ctrl+ in order to expand my geometry. Ctrl+ and Ctrl- is the shortcut, by the way, to expand and shrink the topology. And now I can again press Q, select smooth vertices, and Shift R in order to relax even more if I want. Okay, so that's a nice way to do that. So if I'm going back to face mode while we are there, by the way, I forgot to explain one shortcut. It's the control space shortcut that enables you to quickly maximize a view, which I do often because I really like to work in the context, the context that I'm in. So if I'm modeling some stuff, usually I have the viewport being maximized unless I need to do a very specific thing, but for the vast majority of things that I want to do, because I'm used to shortcuts and I'm set up in a way that is efficient for me, I can do everything that I want right like in front of my mouse or using shortcuts. And that's for me why Blender is powerful compared to other softwares. So here, let's say that I have this piece of bread, or like, because I'm French, so let's talk bread. Let's say I have this piece of bread and I want a really flat face over there. There are tons of ways to do that, but let's say I'm in a context where my geometry and not the object, my geometry is like this. Okay, that's quite hard to flat this face. So when I was starting using Blender, what I will do is something like this. I will like take this piece, press S, or like rotate it, align it a little bit, press S, X, 0 in order to flat it, and then come back like this. And it's still not aligned, so I will tweak it and align it like this, and I will have a flat piece, which is not ideal, okay? And you know what? Instead, like to make it even more obvious that this is not flat, I'm gonna do something even more terrible, like not horrible, sorry. It's like I'm gonna right click in vertex mode and add some random noise like this. Okay, maybe not that much because it will be too much, but something like that. Okay, which by the way is a very nice feature if you want to do terrains and stuff like this. But let's say I want to flatten this face. So the way to do it, like a fast way to do it actually, is to, like, I'm gonna show you the Blender vanilla way, like if you don't enable one add-on that I will really encourage you to enable, which is by default available in Blender. But the one way to do it will be to press Shift and 3, or Shift 7, or Shift 1, or Shift whatever, which basically enables you to go to put your viewport not in a view that is actually set up. Like, what I mean is that by that is that when you press the 1 key, the 3 key, the 7 key, you go to predefined views, which is front, left, top, right, etc. Of course, if you press Control, in addition to 1, 7, or 3, you're gonna go to the opposite view, okay, which is the standard way to navigate using Blender shortcuts. You can press also the square key on top of tab if you don't have a short numpad, sorry, and you can, it's a pie menu, so you can quickly go up, down, and also in the viewport camera view. So in the camera view, sorry. So let's come back to what we want to do, which is flatten this face, or this selection actually. So I can go by pressing Shift 3, and now I can set up my transform orientation to the view, and I can press, you can see that now when I'm scaling, I'm actually scaling according to the view that I'm in. Okay, so I can press SY and 0, and now I've scaled, basically I've aligned this face according to the view, because I've switched to global from view. But I don't like that. I don't like to click on buttons, you know that already. So there is another way. And this way is to go through an add-on that is enabled by default in Blender. Not enabled by default, but you available, sorry, by default in Blender, which is called the loop tool add-on. And you probably know about that already, but just in case, I want to share it with you. So the loop tool add-on enables you by pressing right-click loop tools to go and select flatten. And here, by selecting flatten, you can see that my face is still in the orientation that I want and is being flattened. Okay. And the other cool thing is that you also have this slider enabling you to change the influence of the flatness of what you want. Okay. So neat add-on. Enable it please by default and save your preferences. It's very important to have this one under your belt. You're gonna have tons of fun using it, I'm sure. One other thing that is super nice with this add-on is the circle option. Let's say that I'm going in sculpt mode and I'm going to make an approximate circle in this context. Okay, it's now a circular red. But the thing is that it's not a perfect circle, and I really want, for instance, this loop to be a circle. What I can do is right-click and circle. I can circle it. Right-click, circle. I can circle it again. And because I know my topology over there is a circle, a perfect circle, instead of like going through and doing all my loops with circle, which I can if I want to be very, very precise, I can smooth the geometry that's inside. But as you can see, this loop is not very aligned with this one, so the first thing I will do usually in this context is press Shift 7 in order to align my view perfectly flat according to the loop. So now I know that if I rotate, I'm going to rotate in a context where I'm flat. It's like if I were on the front of my selection. So when I rotate there, I know that in the other views, I'm not going to rotate things in 3D space. I know I will be flat. Okay, so I can rotate it. So now every edges like this, those edges are approximately aligned. And by the way, in order to select a ring like that, you press Ctrl and double click. That's how you select the inner edges, which is nice because after you can press Ctrl B, for instance, in order to add some details or do something like that. Okay. So again, let's come back, Shift 7. And now if I select by pressing C, in order to paint my selection, the inner geometry over there, I can easily press Q, smooth vertices, and Shift R until it stretches back, it smooshes back the geometry inside. So that's a very quick way to make something that at the beginning was not round. Okay, so using this very cool add-on, loop tool, right-click, loop tool, circle, and I can even do that for the last piece. Okay. Any questions regarding what what I mentioned? Are those things that you already seen before that you're used to? Don't hesitate to ask any questions that you want. I'm gonna try to do my best to answer them. If you don't have any questions, I think I'm gonna continue. Okay. So while we're there, okay, I know it's not the best piece of geometry that I've done for a demo, but anyway. While we are there, I'm gonna flatten this geometry again. Right click, flatten. I think yeah, the outer circle was not very aligned. One thing that's quite neat also is that let's say that you want to add some loops over there. And I really want to add 2 loops. Okay, I don't want to imagine that I want this loop to be like this, split it in 2. One thing that I'm used to do. Oh, by the way, I've added a loop over here. Okay. One thing I'm used to do, instead of adding loops by pressing Ctrl R, something like that, and maybe, for instance, removing this one by pressing X and dissolving, or not dissolving, but removing the edge loop, which brings me to this situation. Instead of doing that, usually I'm pressing Ctrl B in order to bevel the loops. Okay. The neat thing with that is that you can add as many loops that you want with the scroll wheel. So I really encourage you to use bevel, even if you are flat. Okay, even bevel is mainly known for doing a bevel, which is like obvious, of course. But for loops, it's also very useful. Like for instance, if I want to generate a loop out of this one, instead of adding Ctrl R a loop over there, I can simply do that, and it will be very much more efficient for me actually. So let's come back on the bevel, by the way. If I press Ctrl B, I can add a bevel, scroll my wheel in order to add more or less geometry. And I can also, by pressing F9, have all the options regarding the bevel. So the bevel options you have is the width, okay, which is quite obvious. We have the shape, which enables you to change the profile. So sometimes you really want to do cuts like this, okay, invert the curve. And you can also, if you want, change the material index. So with that, you can automatically assign a different material, which I'm not going to show you right now because it's also easy to do without this option actually. And you also have the opportunity to change in terms of percentage of your selection. You have tons of options you can play with basically over there, but usually I'm staying with the defaults, which are quite okay. But you also have a profile type here that exists, and this one is quite neat because you can design, if you add even more segment, you will see it. You can design nice ornaments for your curve. So if you want to, for instance, design a sort of Art Nouveau opening, something like that, you can do that with the bevel operator, which is quite neat. And you can see that now I have a bevel that is like very different from the default one, and this can be useful in some situation. Okay. So let's come back to a new plane, and actually let's try to do something else. Oh yes, I wanted to share with you something regarding the bevel. I'm gonna like subdivide my plane again, so Shift R in order to repeat the last operator. It's like the G shortcut in Maya. And let's say that here you can see I have a vertex, and I want to bevel this vertex. I can press Ctrl B. And you can see I cannot bevel a vertex, okay, which is like quite normal, okay. But if I press the V key, I will enter in the bevel vertex mode, okay. And you can see that Blender got my old curve like this, so I can just go back to the default, and let's remove some segments. Come back to 1, okay, and you can see that here the neat thing is that I've created a diamond inside my square. So Ctrl B and V, okay, Ctrl B and V. The neat thing with this is that sometimes, for whatever reason, you want to do a very, let's say, let's say we want to do a stylized pillar. I'm gonna show you how I do those sort of things. You have something like that, and you don't want to sculpt it, you just want a base, for instance, for sculpting it, and you want to break the corner over there. So in order to break it, you can select the vertex, Ctrl B and V, and you've basically destroyed your corner, which is like a nicer start in order to create like the thing. You can also bevel, for instance, over there. And you can see that here I have a strange face, by the way. And this strange face, actually behind the scenes, is a triangle, is two triangles. Like in 3D, in computer graphics, quads, they don't exist. They always translate in triangles. So behind, Blender is trying to generate triangles, but we don't see them. So it's better in this situation to generate the triangles. So even though that's a face that I can select, as you can see, it's better in this situation to create the face. So there are multiple ways to cut faces. You can press J, in order to join the two vertices, and you can see the two vertex, and you can see that Blender is creating the edge actually. Or you can press the K in order to use the knife tool and press enter, which, now you know me, it's less optimized than pressing J, so I rarely use the knife actually, because I know that J is like going to help me in the vast majority of time. Okay, and by the way, if we come back to this geometry over there, the J key is super nice because it also cuts through. So let's say that we have this quad over there. I'm going to focus on it by pressing the dot key on my numpad, as we explained before, pressing Z in order to make it higher. You can see that here I have like some quads that are not defined correctly. So one thing that I can do in this context is I can select this vertex, shift click this vertex, and press J. And you can see that Blender is smart enough to try to add those vertices over there. And here I can complete by pressing J over there. So let's select again this vertex, pressing J, and you can see it finishes the topology over there. And this vertex actually exists. It's like it's not a floating thing on top, okay? Which is very neat from Blender. And here I can add my loops for if I need them for whatever reason. Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit questions in the chat. So is Maya hard to learn compared to Blender? Honestly, I think so. Because Maya is you won't have that much tutorial compared to Blender because of the community. Also, Maya can be very frustrating for a beginner, a 3D artist beginner. So I will say, like, you probably know that already. I know how to work in Maya, at least I will say the basics, but I'm not a very big fan of the software from a UX point of view. I mean, you can do pretty incredible stuff with Maya for the advanced things, but for the vast majority of things that you're going to do day to day, if you're modeling, if you're rigging, if you're animating, if you're doing anything related, 3D related, it's slow actually. Like the UX is slow. So that's why I'm not a very big fan of Maya. So if you are a beginner, I will advise you to start with Blender because you have tons of materials online. The software is evolving a lot, and today more and more studios, video game and film, are transitioning to Blender, which is a very good news for the industry, for the 3D industry, not for Blender, for the 3D industry. It means more content because people are getting much more efficient with like the basic stuff for what they are doing 99% of the day, not 99, but 90% of the day. It's simple stuff, like repetitive stuff, and like things that is part of the job, right? So it means in the end, if they are more efficient, production will be faster, therefore you will have more content, therefore the world will be happier with more content. That's actually what I think. So any tips real world scale, regarding the real world scale? Not that much. Like in Blender you have, let's create another object. In Blender you can, in the item there, choose the scale that you want. You can see it's in meter over there. I can press centimeter there, and I have like 0.02 meter side of this plane, x scale on this plane. It's really important to have the scale normalized, especially if you export to an engine. So you can press Ctrl A and in order to apply the scale. So now it's normalized. And apart from that, you can, yeah, if you want 2 kilometer, you can press KM and you will have like this 2 kilometer square. And you can see I cannot see it anymore because my camera, my viewport camera, is not able to render it. In order to do that, I have to go in the view and I have to push even further the clip end. Okay, so let's add a few more meters in the equation and I can now see it. You can see it starts to cut at some point. Okay, means that the clip end of the camera is not there. In 3D, a camera works like this. You have this volume that we call the frustum, and not the frustrum, the frustum. Sorry, I'm a bit precise with that. And you project the view like this, but you're not going to render the entire world for reasons of, like, from performances reason. So therefore, in the API that renders that helped you render the things on screen, usually OpenGL in the context of Blender. The other one is DirectX that you probably heard of from games. They have what we call the far plane and the near plane. They have the far and the near plane. And basically the far plane here, it's a plane. So here I'm from a top view, of course. And the near plane, let's say it's there. And those are the two values that you can set up here for your viewport camera, for your working camera in the viewport. Okay, and the further you go, the slower, of course, your viewport will be, because the more objects are going to be probably inside the frustum, and all the objects that are inside this volume, from between the far plane and the near plane, are going to be rendered. Okay, so it works for far away objects, you can see there. So I need probably to add one more 0, but again, this is not a good idea if you're working not with big object. But if I go very close, you're gonna have, like, we are gonna have the same issue. Let's say I have a bigger clip plane, something like that. So if I press Shift B, now that you know the shortcut, at some point, if I'm close enough, you can see here we are clipping the object. So the thing is that if I come back more and more closer to the camera, I will be able to see more things from the front if I'm very close to an object. So those are the settings, clip planes basically. So let's reset it to the default value and let's remove this object and let's add an object in the scene and press dot in order to focus on it. So just one thing I want to share with you regarding a nice shortcut regarding those triplets of values over there. When you have a vector of 3 components in the UI, or anything that is like grouped, where can I find some grouped things? Let's see. I'm not very lucky. Oh, okay, well, anyway, we have grouped stuff over there. So when you have grouped stuff like this, one thing that you can do that's quite neat is that you can click. You're not leaving out your index finger from the left click. You go down and you grab the other sliders with it, and either you go left and right in order to slide the sliders, but as you can see, I'm sliding every sliders unless they are null, which means that they don't have like depths. In the context of a plane, they don't have a depth, so let's grab a cube. So I can basically drag, go down, left and right, and this enables me to go very quick in order to change the object. And one other thing that you can do is, like, you can go down, let go, and save the value that you want. For instance, I want to make this cube 2 meters, I press 2 and enter, and I'm good to go. Okay? So that's a quite neat option, and you will be able to see that here also I've added a cube in the operator. That's the last operator. I have, for instance, those those things over there. I can also like use this triplet of values. Okay, and as I mentioned previously, you can also press the Shift key in order to reduce the intensity of the mouse. So you can see here that's the default intensity. I'm moving very slowly. And if I press Shift, you can see with approximately the same intensity, I'm going to divide. Okay. So that's a neat thing. You can also for instance, for the locks on the side, you can go in a row. So you can see I can lock everything very fast. Like all the transform, I just have to do that with one click and drag or unlock them. So please don't click one by one. You're gonna hurt your hand at the end of the day by doing those sort of things. And one other thing is that you can press, when you have drop-down menus like this, instead of going in the drop-down and selecting the thing, you can press the Control key and scroll your mouse wheel, on top of it. Okay, so that's a neat way to move. And usually any control over a slider and the mouse wheel enable you to change the numerical value that you have inside. Okay. So let's come back with our cube. And yes, by the way, regarding sliders or numerical value in Blender, actually those are small expression box, meaning that you can type things, math, expression, and they will work. So that's super nice. For instance, let's say that you have here, you want to have 90 degrees divided by 2 because you don't know it's 45. You can type 90 divided by 2 and it works. Let's say you want the sine of pi. You type sine of pi and you have 0 in this context. Let's say you want the sine of a random value. You type it and you got it. Okay, that's really nice. Let's say now I want to make a link between the value and the timeline. Let's say that I want to send the frame value, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 exactly, etc., etc. I want to send that in a channel. I can also doing that. I can also do that. So the way to do it is to type #frame, and now you can see that this slider becomes a driver, meaning that it's going to be purple and not accessible anymore. If I do that, you can see how it changes at the end. In the bottom, Blender says you can't edit driven number value, see the graph at the top, blah, 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 blah. And you can see that actually, when I move my timeline, it actually sends the frame number directly to the channel. Okay? That's cool. Because now, if I re-enter my slider, I can do, for instance, times 0.2. Okay? And when I play, you can see it goes slower. Times 0.01, like, let's say. Okay? That's quite nice, because now I have like a procedurally generated animation and I have nothing to do. Okay? I can also say, because it's a driver, it means that if I right click and edit the driver, you see it's a real driver, meaning that I can open the driver editor over there and you can see there I have the X location of my cube as a scripted expression where frame is actually the frame number over there. And you can see it's time a smaller value. Okay. The cool thing with drivers, you probably already know that, is that you can copy them. So I can select this driver, copy the driver, and let's say I want to rotate this cube on the z-axis. I can right-click on the z-axis and paste the driver, or not the scale, the rotation. Okay. And now you can see my cube is turning. I have nothing to do. I don't animate. I can also here change the value, like if I want a faster rotation for this one, as you can see. And let's say that now I want also to change the scale. I paste my driver and I edit my driver, and I don't want it to scale infinitely. I want to scale it with a sinus, meaning you probably remember from math class that a sinus is a wave like this. Okay, that goes between minus and 1 and minus and 1 and minus and 1, etc. So if I put everything of this inside a sinus, you will see that my cube is going to scale between minus and 1, which is not a good idea because of course it's going to flip to be flipped. But I can, as you can see, I can procedurally generate animations with like 3 drivers very quickly. Okay, so that's a pretty cool thing to know. Is that you can have access to those sliders very quickly. Another thing that's good to know with sliders or anything approximatively in Blender is that you can copy and paste them without entering into the slider. So for instance, if I want to copy the value 42 over there, which for whatever reason I cannot change it, I need to select my cube, Whoa. What's happening over there? Oh yes, because I've changed the scale. It's driven, so I cannot change the value. Let's say I want to put 4.2 over there in the Y. I can just put my mouse on top of it, Control C and Control V on another slider. I don't have to enter into the slider if I want to copy a thing. And that's exactly also the way you can do it with colors. For instance, I want to copy this blue color, purple color, Control C over it, on top of it, Control V in another color thing. Okay, so that's actually quite nice. Let's talk about color a little bit. I want to share with you another tip. I'm sorry I'm jumping here and back and here, like in different areas. I'm taking a pass and it's randomly bringing me to sharing with you some tips. Okay, there is no structure in this live. I just want to share as much tips as I can remember with you. And I really do think we'll have to do another one or many other ones because I won't have the time to to share everything I want with you. So let's talk a little bit about colors. So I'm going to do actually a simple. I'm going to go in the over there in the shading tab because it's easier for me to generate to go there. I could also have added a new tab like this and go in the shader editor. Let's do that for whatever reason. And there is one thing that's quite neat regarding color ramps. So I'm going to share this with you. So the things I want in this context is, let's say I want a gradient on this object. So I'm going to go in the input, going to take the texture coordinates, and I think I'm gonna just watch the UVs first. Not the UVs actually. We're going to use the object and we're going to put it to put a gradient or directly a color ramp actually like this. And we're gonna grab the Y component, the Z component of this object, meaning that we will have. Let me just remove those drivers because they are going to drive me crazy. No pun intended. So I'm gonna reset my object, Alt S in order to reset the scale, Alt R in order to reset the rotation, Alt G in order to reset the location. And let's say I want to just grab from the object texture coordinate. I just want to grab the Z position of the object for whatever reason. What I can do is I can grab I can split the vector actually. So it's called should be called split actually, or maybe not. Let me find that in the vector. We have combine. Should be combine actually, combine XYZ, and the other one is decompose split. Should be called split actually. Oh, maybe I'm confused with let me press Shift A and like try to find. I'm sorry, I forgot actually. Oh, it's probably in convert separate. It's called separate XYZ. So I'm putting that. I'm grabbing the objects of the object position, and I'm then grabbing the Y value. Not the Y, sorry, the Z value. Oh, by the way, if you don't know how to disconnect quickly a link like that, you can press Control and right click to cut it very quickly. Okay, and then I'm going to go in EV mode, and you can see that what I've done here is I've just put the Z value through this gradient, okay, enabling me to create this neat gradient for the demonstration. And I'm just grabbing the Z value, okay, and I'm remapping it, and it's in object space, meaning that I can scale my cube, and actually my cube works related to it actually, and not the world, okay. So here I have a gradient, so that's cool. If I want to do a nice gradient for my cube, I can. So let's do something like this. And you know what? I'm not even going to go in the principal BSDF. I'm going to go directly in the material output, so it's like unlit without any shading over there. So let's say I want to do something like this. A very nice a very awful gradient. And let's say here I'm gonna multiply, so I'm gonna add a math node here and multiply in order to scale my position. So I can unscale it a little bit, and I'm gonna duplicate this multiply, drop it on top of the connection, and add and change it to an add, so I can change the position of my gradient, something like that. Okay, so let's say that I have this. With this color ramp, one thing that's super nice is that I can actually pick a gradient from another source. So I can press the E key on top of the gradient, and I can drag and drop somewhere in the UI in order to grab the colors. Okay, so you can imagine that if you have, I don't have an image to load now, but you can imagine that if you, oh, what's going on? I cannot, okay, I cannot drop the viewport. I don't know why. Okay, let me fix my Blender. That's a new way of working actually for me. Okay, so let's say that, you know what, we're gonna go into shading. Let's say that I want to grab, for instance, the background color there. I can press E and grab all the colors that I want in order to create a nice little gradient like this. Okay, so it's super nice if you have, for instance, in a document, you grab an image and you import it in Blender, and you want to quickly drag and drop this, grab this, you can do it. Okay, so one other nice usefulness, like utility for this is for instance, a toon shader. Let's say that I want to create a very quick, very dirty and quick shader for toon. I can remove everything. Here I can grab, let's go in Eevee mode, let's change that for sunlight. Okay, I can select my sphere that has no shading over there. I can press Shift A, let's add a shader, which is going to be texture, not texture, but it's going to be a shader diffuse, a simple diffuse. Okay, we don't need the rest. You can see how the light is maybe a bit too big, so too intense, so I'm going to reduce it a little bit. But this is exactly what I need. I need this separation of light and dark, okay, light and shadow. So I have my diffuse, and after my diffuse, I'm gonna say to Blender, please, from this diffuse, make an image, or give me access to the pixels, actually. And this is exactly what I'm gonna do. I'm going to say shader to RGB, and after this node, here you can see that I have access to the color after the shader applied itself to the geometry, okay? So here, I'm in a situation where nothing changes, basically. But here, the cool thing is that I have colors that I can manipulate. So I can easily add a color ramp, okay, and remap my shadows and my light, okay? And the neat thing about that is that, let's say I'm going to Krita, I'm gonna create a new document in Krita or in Photoshop, in whatever. I'm gonna do something not nice at all. Just going to do a very quick and dirty sphere just for fun. With the airbrush. Let's say it's even going to be brighter over there. And for the bottom, I'm gonna put a bounce light, maybe a dark, a warm one. No, it's not very nice. Something like that, but I'm going to lower it. Okay, it's not very appealing, but I guess I hope you see my point. So let's say that this is the thing that I want. I'm going to be very lazy. I'm going to grab a screenshot and I'm going to save it as an image. over there. Okay, you don't see it, it's on my other monitor. Where is it? Oh, it's there. So back to Blender. I'm going to go in the, oh, I'm very not happy with the split shortcut. Sorry. I'm going to go in the image editor, drag my shader, the shader I want to map. Okay, and here I press E, and the thing I have to do is going from the bounce light to the highlight. Okay, and what I've done is I grabbed, if you want, the color information of my highlights of my shader. Sorry, and you can see that here I get the information that I need. Of course, I need to tweak it a little bit if I want. It's quite easy that now that I have that, I can also say distribute the stops evenly. You can see that now it's like a perfect gradient. Okay, I can also, if I change the strength of the light, because it comes from a shader, you can see how it works. Okay, and I can remap the lighting basically with this gradient. And of course, I can reset my color ramp if I need. I can also flip the lighting. In fact, indeed, it's flipping the lighting. And I can also, I can also be more precise and remap those colors. And if I want to make a toon shader, because that was the original goal, I can go in linear there and say constant now. And you can see how I have bends there that works nice. And I can actually work with those different bends. And it actually does the trick. So if I take the monkey, for instance, press Ctrl 2 in order to add a subdivision surface, I right-click, shift-click, right-click, sorry, shade smooth, and I'm gonna pick this material by shift-clicking the material, the sphere that I want to grab the material from, and I press Ctrl L to link, to transfer basically the material, and you can see that now I have my material on my little Susan, and it's quite interactive. Okay, so that's a very quick way if you want to create a toon shader, for instance. Okay, you know what? File new. Let's switch to another topic. One other topic that can be interesting to. First, I'm going to read the chat. If you have questions. I want to remesh. Hello. I want to remesh modifier starts with 0.5 instead of 0.5. I can change it without open remesh modifier. Sorry, I don't understand your question. Cool. Okay. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about modeling. We've talked a little bit about shading. We've talked a bit about drivers. What else can I show you? Probably know that already, but you can extrude by pressing the E key, of course, but you can also extrude by pressing Ctrl and right click. And the neat thing with that is that it aligns. Okay, it aligns with your direction. So that's a good way to extrude some stuff. If you want, for instance, to draw using an edge loop, you can start, for instance, by, or let's say you can start by grabbing a vertex, extrude it like this, Control and right click. Okay, and let's say I want to transform that into a curve. I go in object mode, right click, convert to curve. Now I have a curve over there. That's quite nice, because if I want, I can also, because now I'm in the curve menu, what I can do is I can say V, change the type of handle to align. I don't know why it's not working actually. Should be working. The V, toggle free, or maybe V. aligned. It should be working. I have no idea why it's not working. Anyway, I have a curve now, and in order to extrude it, the cool thing is that I can add another curve, and I can say please sorry, I'm gonna go there directly. Please use in the geometry data this object as a reference, and now I have a curve that I started to extrude with Control and right click, which is a very fast way to generate some direction. Again, the only thing I'm a bit sad about is the spline type. I need to change it to Bezier. Sorry. So now it's a Bezier curve, and now I have access to the handles. So right click, align now, and now that's aligned. I can tweak it the way I want. So that's how I can switch from types to Bezier. And there is also automatic that tries to make it a little bit automatic, which is what it is actually, and this works quite nice. One other thing regarding curves while we are there, I already explained that in the head tutorial, the cartoon head tutorial, is that you can twist it by pressing Ctrl T. You just have to select the vertices that you want to twist, and they're twisting on themselves, okay? And you can twist them as much as you want. Of course, you need much more resolution than this, so you go for this context, so you go here and you just increase the resolution over there, and this works. Super nice if you want to make like a telephone wire, if you want to make nice hairs for your character, or like things like this basically. And you can see that I'm gonna right click, just select the object, just select the other piece, which is, yeah, it's there. Right click and shade smooth, and no, sorry, this one, right click shade smooth. And the neat thing also with this curve is that you can see for each vertex that I'm selecting, I have the tilt over there that I can change. I can also change the weight, which is like useful. It's metadata that's used for modifiers, but I can also change the radius. So if I want to taper the thing over there, I can press Alt S, which is the shortcut. Again, I don't like to click on buttons. So I can press Alt S0 in order to make it like 0 scale over there. Let's press Alt S0 over there. And let's say I want to scale this, I can over there by pressing Alt S, okay? And this is how I can make a very quick curve like this, very quickly. So curves are super useful in Blender for creating hairs, for creating wires and things like that. So I really encourage you to get familiar with them. They are super nice, very easy to manage, to control. So yes, they are very fun to work with in a lot of situations. So I think I'm gonna give you some other tips, and we're gonna plan another video or another live for next time, actually, because I have so many things to share with you. But do you want to see more modeling tips? You want to see more animation tips, rigging tips, grease pencil tips, shading tips? Feel free to ask me, and I'm gonna try my best to share in neat tips that I didn't cover already. I'm gonna wait a little bit and do a pause. I can hear your cat meowing in the background for a moment. I don't have a cat. I don't know what you heard. Oh yes, one thing that's nice in modeling, I can show you. I don't know what this is. Sorry about the noise. Okay. I'm gonna create a new file like this, and the tips I wanted to share with you is very useful for selection. Okay, I'm gonna just bevel the top like this, because why not? And I'm going to show you how to select things randomly. So let's say that I have this and I want to select randomly. You can go in the select tab here and you have select random. And you can select random faces. Super useful if you want to quickly do some concept sketches or things like that. So that's usually a good plan. Or if you want to do a terrain, for instance, let's say I'm subdividing this and I'm going to go to select random. I'm going to use the proportional editing by pressing O, and I'm going to do something like that. Oh, actually the selection was not the best, so I'm going to press Ctrl I in order to invert my selection in vertex mode, and then I'm going to press O in order to access the proportional editing, G, and Z in order to hire this thing, and now we have a terrain. So that's one way. The other way that I mentioned previously is I can also add noise to an object. So if I go there, right click and randomize vertices, you can, sorry, let's do that again. Here I can say I randomize the things. I can lower the amount a little bit, and I can make sure it's aligned to the normal. Okay. And if I add a subdivision surface modifier by pressing Ctrl 2, I have another sort of terrain if you want. And a last way in order to do random stuff, random manipulation in Blender, is you also have in the proportional editing over there different type of proportional, and you have one that's called random, meaning that when I will move, you can see it's randomly moving some vertices inside. Okay. And again, I can add the subdivision surface to have a terrain. But let's come back to the default proportional editing. But let's come back to this cylinder where it is. Oh, I've lost it. Let's redo it. Control B, something like that. So we saw how to randomly generate some vertices. Randomly select some vertices or components actually. We also have checker deselect. Checker deselect is super nice when you want a checker. So you can click there and you can see it tries to unselect in a checker way. So the best situation for seeing how this works is to have actually a real checker to do. So in this context, I can say checker deselect and you can see this works. Okay, and from that, for instance, I can press I in order to inset and Z in order to, for instance, extrude like this, and you can see how I can quickly create this sort of pattern. So quite neat. But another thing that's quite neat is that, of course, you know already Ctrl plus in order to increase the geometry. If I want to select the things that are under my cursor but that are connected, I can put my cursor on top of it and press L in order to link, to select the objects that are linked together. L over the object. You can also select a vertex, and if you're not on top of the object and you press Ctrl L, it's going to still start from your selection in order to expand it to the connected piece of geometry. So that's a good things to note. Ctrl L instead of L. So that's neat. And also if you have UVs, seams, so let's say I have a seam there, Ctrl E, mark seam in edge mode. You can press L and you can see that it's not going to select everything because I'm not in face mode, but by default in face mode, if I press L, it stops at the seam. And you can see that this is this option. If I don't have a delimiter here, okay, I'm not going to be selecting only the island, okay, that I've selected. So that's another things to note. So I can press L over there and say, oh, in fact, you know what, I wanted the seam to stop my selection of the seam. Coming back on the things that I wanted to share with you regarding selection. So Control plus, you already know it, to expand your selection. Control minus to lower your selection. But I can also, so double click to select a loop if you have enabled 3-button mouse enabled. If you're in edge mode, Control and double click, you select the ring, which enables you to create those sort of thing. Okay, like for instance with a bevel, if I want to do like this sort of geometry, it's a neat way to do it. But if I want to select 1/2 in the direction of the loop, there is also a way. So I can select this face, shift select this face, and I can press Control Shift and plus. And you can see that now it skips one face according to the pattern that I've done, which is actually quite nice because you will see that often you have to do that. For instance, if you want to model, let's say, I'm going to start with a circle, for instance, and I want to select 1 out of 2. So I'm going to select 1, skip 2, and press Control Shift and plus. Apparently it's not working. Okay, so let's extrude a little face like this. So I'm gonna select this, skip 2, and Control Shift plus, sorry. And you can see that now I'm skipping 1 out of 2. And of course now it's not possible because the geometry is not working accordingly. But the neat thing with that is I can quickly select those sort of thing, and then from the top view using circle select, I have the things, for instance, that I want to extrude, and I can start from there, for instance. I don't know what it is, but that's the idea. How to put an axis of symmetry of an asymmetrical shape. What? Okay, so you mean you have an object that's asymmetrical, so let's do that. And you still want to be able to manipulate it using symmetry, right? So if you're in sculpt node, you can do that by clicking on this option. You will be able to tweak it with symmetry a little bit. If you're in edit mode, you can still select this and it will try to work with it, but it's not always working, as you can see. And you can also try to use topology mirror over there if it works, but here it's not going to work very fine. So I will say, like, manipulating an object that is asymmetrical with symmetry is probably not the good idea, to be fair with you. One thing you can do is, which I know will seem a little bit crazy if you still want to do that, is let's say you have an asymmetrical object, something like that, and you still want to manipulate it with symmetry. You can create another object on top of it, and you can in the viewport display over there, you can mark this object as wireframe. As display as wire. So you have a sort of cage on top of it if you want. Okay, I'm gonna make it like this. I'm gonna mirror this object, so adding a cut in the center, removing one side, adding the mirror modifier with the clipping option. And this cage on top of this object that's asymmetrical, I'm gonna bind basically this cage to this object. So this is a mesh, a real mesh, and I'm gonna bind it in the sort of in a way that when I move the topology of this one, it's going to affect the topology below. So I'm gonna select this object and say mesh deform from the cage and bind it. So it can take a little bit of time to bind an object. And once it's bound, here you can see I'm in a mirror context from the cage, actually manipulating the object from below, but it's asymmetrical. So probably that's one way to do it. But again, you probably have an issue regarding the workflow. Like in the context of a foot, I will definitely go like this, or I will use a lattice. So you model your shoe, for instance, like symmetrically, and then you select a lattice on top of it. You add a lattice on top of it. You can increase, for instance, the resolution of the lattice, and you select the object, Control P. You bind the lattice deform, which will basically add a modifier on top of it. I remove the mesh modifier on top. And now you have a lattice, which is exactly the same thing as I've shown before, but with an object that is a grid, basically. Okay. So I have this, and I can manipulate my foot. So this is one way to do it, I will say. And this is usually for shoes, that's what I'm doing. I'm using mesh deform to do that. But yeah, that's the only way that I know. Maybe there is another way, but. And by the way, in order to mirror an object very quickly, there is a super nice add-on that you can enable by default in Blender. You just type mirror, and it's called auto mirror. And if you go in edit auto mirror, you click on this button, and it already added the cut in the center and set up the modifier for you. And you can see I'm already set up in auto mirror. Okay, so the nice thing with that, usually what I'm doing is, for instance, if I have a cube like this, I right click and add it to my quick favorite like this. So if, for instance, I have an object there, I want to mirror it, right click auto mirror, you can see it's already being mirrored in the right direction. Super nice. So what I've done a few minutes ago, meaning adding a cut, removing one piece, adding the mirror modifier, adding the clipping, I'm rarely doing it. So, and it works with tons of objects. So if I want to mirror that auto mirror, you can see it still works. So that's quite neat. Okay. So that's a very good add-on to have under your toolbat. I thought about something, I just forgot about it, I'm sorry. We talked about lattices, we talked about mirror. Oh yes, there is an add-on that you can, two add-ons that I'm going to show you that are already being integrated in Blender that are super nice. One is called extra object and the other extra curve. You can just enable them by default. And now in the meshes, you have other, as you can see, other objects. So for instance, you have gears, so I can add gear. And if you press F9, you have tons of options in order to set up those gears. It can be very useful if you want to do quick concepts. Okay, so feel free to try to play along with them. You have rocks. So rocks, actually, it comes from an add-on that's called rock generator, I think. Probably it's in the testing. No, it's probably in the extra object, actually. And you have, as you can see, a rock, and you can, of course, by pressing F9 or just going there if you want, you have the things that set up the rocks as you want. And as you can see, it's actually a stack of different modifiers. So that's a good thing to know. You also have another add-on that's very nice that's called object scatter. So this one, you can see it's not enabled on my side, but let me show you how it works. So let's say that I have a terrain, so now you know how to generate quick terrains using, for instance, randomized vertices. Let's do it like this, Control-2 in order to add some subdivision surface. Let's do a terrain like this, and let's Control-A on top of the modifier to enable it. And then, in this case, what I want is I'm going to scatter some rock on the terrain. So I can do that using a particle system. You're probably used to do that. But I can also use this neat add-on, so I'm going to show you how it works. So let's add a few rocks. Let's grab, for instance, a river rock like this. And let's add 3 of them. Press Enter to validate. Sorry. And those rocks, I'm going to, maybe not this one, you know what? I just want another one that looks different. Just one. Let's add different settings. Something like that. Okay, it's going to be fine. So I'm going to select those 3 rocks over there, and here, it's not here actually, it's in the scene tab, I think. Or press I don't remember where the option is actually. Oh, it's there. It's the object scatter will be there, but you have to call a modifier. So I'm selecting all my objects there, or all my rocks. I'm gonna press M to put them in a new collection, to call them rocks. And then I'm going to shift click at the end the terrain. And then usually when I don't find an option, I press F3 and I type what I need to find. So here it's called object scatter. So you can see it's in object and scatter. It should be scattered there. And now I can draw and it will be scattering the objects that I need. And you can see that here I can press space, enter to validate, and it will take the options that I have there. It's a one stop modifier, meaning not modifier, operator, sorry, meaning that let's scatter again. You can see if I'm scattering, it scatters according to those settings. So you have to set up the settings first. So let's do that. Less density, scatter, and now it works. Okay, so that's quite nice if you want to quickly generate some pebbles, for instance, on your object. And the cool thing is that it generated a sort of small triangle, sorry, that also aligns the object. So basically, why there is a triangle there, it's because it takes the normal to orient the instance, okay? And if you look how it works behind the scenes, you have what we call duplicator over there. And if you go in object, in instancing, you can see that it instanced an object, okay, from the faces, okay? So that's how it works. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the live, usually like add-ons, they're just there to facilitate some operation that already exists in Blender, and this is also possible to do by hand. So that's a nice little add-on. Let me show you one thing that actually I forgot to mention in the beginning of the stream. That's actually quite neat. A lot of people coming from other softwares, they're not used to the 3D cursor, so this thing that you can change, that you can put on the scene where you want using the shift and right click option. If you select something and you press shift S and you go down, okay, you can snap the cursor to the selection, which is usually the way I'm changing my pivot points. So let's say I want to change the pivot point, which is this thing, to this corner or the other one. I select the object, the vertex, I press shift S and I go down, and then in object mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. So that's one way, and now my pivot point is over there. Okay, so that's one way, but the other way that's more familiar to people coming from other software is actually to affect the origin when you're moving something. So if I press Control and comma key, semicolon key, you can see that this appears, and now when I move, when I do something such as moving by pressing G or R or S, actually I change the pivot point of the object. So I can do that, Control semicolon, and now my pivot is there, and I'm back to the original mode of transform. So Control semicolon is the things that helps you. If you enable snapping, by the way, the shortcut to enable snapping is Shift Tab. You can go here and say I want to snap to the vertices, for instance, and now I can I should be able to snap to the vertices, which is not working for whatever reason. That's very strange. Should be working. Oh yes, it works. Sorry. You see, there is a small magnetic field over there, and this is how you can very quickly set up your pivot point. Okay, Control semicolon, okay, which is the magical shortcut. And this you can change it over there by pressing N in the tool section. You also have this. Affect only the origin, the location. Location is like, of course, the location of the object. Okay, so if you need, that's there. Any questions? Okay, and in order to finish this live, I'm going to show you an animation tips tip, sorry, actually. So because we didn't talk about that, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So two tips actually. One that's quite cool is the bouncing ball. Okay, so let's animate a bouncing ball. Okay, let's go to frame 1. I added a key by pressing I, location. Okay, and I go to key 40, and I'm gonna put my ball over there, and I to insert a key. So I have this not bouncing ball. And the cool thing is that if you press Ctrl Tab in order to switch between the timeline and the curve editor, you can do also that using the dope sheet if you want. Okay, Ctrl Tab is the shortcut. Oh, sorry, forgot to re-enable the shortcuts when I left. Sorry. What I wanted to mention is that keys in Blender, they can be of a specific type. You can see that here they are Bezier type, okay, with automatic handles. You can press the V key in order to change the type. For instance, we want to break them like this, for instance, if we want to make us ease in, ease out. But you also have another menu, which is the T key, and you can now decide of the interpolation type. And here I have bounce, for instance. And you can see I still have two keys. Let me remove the Y and the Z key channel. So I have only my two keyframes on the Z. And you can see that it automatically creates the bounce motion over there for me. And I just have two keys and I have nothing else to do, which is quite neat, right? And if I want, on top of that, I can add some modifiers over there. So I can, for instance, add a modifier with noise. And I have like a noisy bouncing ball on top of that. And I can change the scale, etc., etc. I can also, for instance, create a cycle out of this. Okay, I can decide how many cycles that I want. If I press 0, by the way, by default it's going to repeat. I can say repeat mirrored, so it's going to do an inverse. You can see, which is quite neat in order to have a great cycle in this context. And you can decide about the influence of the mirror, how many, like, how this modifier is being how this modifier influences the motion. And you have tons of stuff that you can add. For instance, one thing that I really like is to create, for instance, turntables. Usually what I do is I add a camera to an empty. I grab a camera like this, I parent it to the other way around, I parent it to the empty by keeping the transformation, meaning that when I rotate, the camera rotates with me. So let me enter in camera view, but before I'm going to put, I'm going to put a monkey, something like that. By the way, if you want to set up the camera in the viewport, in the view that you are in, you can press Ctrl-Alt-0 and this will take the view you are in. But for now, I'm going to do something like that and G just to reorient the camera. And one thing that I want to do now is an infinite cycle. So in order to do that, I can, instead of putting a key, I can, two keys, sorry, I can already put like just one key, okay, on the rotation axis, which is the R rotation axis. But before I need to not be in quaternion. So if you're in quaternion, you're going to have an issue. Just go in XYZ, it's going to be fine here. I just add one key of rotation. I'm going to remove the other axis that I don't need, so only the Z axis. My key is there. And if I press N, if I select my key, I have modifiers there, and there is one that's called generator. And generator is super nice. It's a polynomial modifier, sorry. And as you can see, this polynomial like creates a line like this, goes to infinite. And by default, it's very hard because you can see it's very, it's very steep. But you can see that if you scale a little bit by pressing Ctrl and the middle mouse button, you can like tweak the view in order to see the steepness or to reframe if you want your keys. you can over there change the exponent, something like that, and have a much better curve, a slower one, and you can see how this makes my camera turn around the object. So that's one actually very quick way to do that. Okay, and this is infinite. Okay, which is quite neat because I can be where I want, like in my timeline, and this is automatically being generated for me. So that's quite a nice trick. Otherwise, the other way to do a turn, if you want to be very precise in terms of range, one thing that you can do is you can press I, do a rotation key over there. You go to the middle, like a few frames later, for instance 121. You press RZ 180. You type 180 in order to do a 180 degree. You add another key of rotation. You go to here, because this was the center, I go to 240 or whatever the key, in fact you will see why. I just do RZ and I do one more 180 degree. I add a key and you can see that I have a curve like this. I'm just going to remove the other channels and remove the center key because now I know I am in the right direction. And select my two keys, press T, make them linear, and if I go to this key over there, just go with the left key one key before, I press Control and End in order to end my timeline over there. Control End is the shortcut to change the range for the end. Control Home is the start, by the way. And now I have a perfect cycle of rotation. You will see it will be seamless when it arrives there. So it's a perfect cycle, but it's done with keys and it's not procedurally generated. Okay. So that's one way to create a turn. Usually I do my turns like this because I want them to cycle. With a GIF, it's quite neat. So, and the last tip I want to show you is something that I'm showing a lot regarding animation, to add some life into secondary action, into what is called overlap in animation. It's actually quite easy to do that, so I'm going to show you how. Let's say we are going to add some bones, so I'm going to add some armature, and I'm going to extrude this bone, subdivide it multiple times, something like that. Even more. 5 times. Yeah, it's going to be cool, like this. So you know that when you rotate a bone or you rotate something, it rotates with different pivot points. And if you go in individual origin while having bones selected that are connected, so the bones are connected, meaning that the tip of the bone is linked to the root of its parent. If I do that and I press R, you can see that now it bends. And it bends in a very organic way, okay? It curls, basically. Because this one rotates, but the next one rotates according to the rotation of its parent, okay? So the neat thing with that is that I can have, for instance, one pose like this. Let's do that. I insert a rotation key over there. I'm also going to go in the dop sheet over there, showing my keys. I'm gonna mirror this, so I press Ctrl C in order to copy the pose. I'm going to go in the frame 20, Ctrl Shift, Ctrl V. Oh, apparently it's not working because my bones are not. Yeah, I don't have a symmetry. Sorry, that I cannot symmetrize something that's not symmetrical because Blender does not know the axis. So it's quite fair in this context. So what I'm gonna do is just go to the other way around, add a key, and you can see that I have this very stiff actually animation. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to duplicate those keys like this, and once more I'm going to duplicate them I do things like this. Okay, And now what I want to do is open the keys, and I'm going to select all my bones, but not the last one. Okay, and you can see they are isolated over there. And I'm going to offset my keys by 2. Then I'm going to press B. Using the middle mouse button, I'm going to deselect this bone. Now you can see that one bone left. I move all my keys to the right. Sorry. B, I deselect one bone. 2 keys. B, middle mouse button to deselect. I move forward 2 keys. And B, I deselect this bone and I move forward 2 keys. And now look at this motion. It creates a flappy motion, and I don't have to rig anything. It's a very, very organic secondary motion with overlap. And this is simply by offsetting the break in the rotation that we've done. Okay, so if you have a tail to animate, if you have a rope to animate, if you have like anything that flaps behind a character or ear or whatever, this sort of thing is very easy to do. You don't have to be a big rigger, like a superstar in rigging. You can do that. Okay. Same thing if you have to do latencies, for instance, in bones. I can create another armature. This time I'm just going to have 4 bones just for the sake of it. I can do I in pose mode, of course, location this time, and I'm gonna say those bones are going to go there. Okay, so I have those bones going to do that. Okay, easy. I deselect one, I offset the bones, I deselect one, I offset the bones, I deselect one, I offset the bone. And you can see how they go with latency. Makes sense, right? I don't need a rig to do that. It's the same idea with rotations, actually. And the cool thing with the rotation one is that you can cycle it. You can make a perfect cycle. Super nice for a video game, for instance, export and things like that. Okay. And if you combine with what I've shared with you a few moments ago, meaning that you have effects on your keys, for instance, this time elastic, you can see how you can create pretty crazy motion with this. Super useful for motion design. You can see how it's very nice to have this flexibility in the software. Okay. So I still have some tips, but I'm gonna keep them for the next time, actually. I hope this was useful for you. I can take some questions if you have some of them. About curves, we are rating vertex group box option for better amateur rig control. Randomize those 2 frames offset by a small fraction. Actually, that's a question. Is there a way to select a bunch of keyframes and randomize the value and time, but certain amounts? From a certain amount, I have no idea. This is actually quite a good question. Let me go in the curve mode. Let me try to find in linear. Usually when I go in the random proportional editing here, I don't think we can do that very easily unless we have an add-on actually. I would say the only way will be that I would use actually will be to add noise on your key. And maybe restrict the range here. You can say from where to where the noise will be. So that's one way to do that. I know it's not very easy because you have to do it like if you have multiple keyframes that that you want this behavior, you have to you have to basically copy this modifier each time, which is not the best. But this is something that's actually possible. I can imagine that there are add-ons doing that for you automatically. And here you have also blending, so you can see that. Let's do this with a cube. Will be easier to see. I add a key here. I have a key here. I have this, and let's say I want noise on the y-axis of this frame. So I add noise there. You can see that it's on everything. I change the scale, but I restrict the range to the center. Again, you can select both sliders together and move them. Now I need to move this a bit before. Let's say I want this to end at frame 60. It's going to be better. This starts at frame 30. I have my noise in between, but here I can blend it with the curve. Blend it in and out. So basically my cube is going to go there and start noisy and stop in the end. So that's one way you can do that. And of course you can change the... You can also offset the noise if you want. Something like that. I will say that's one way to do that. Any other questions before I close the live? Yeah, randomizing the keys, honestly, I don't have any idea how to do that easily. You know what? I'm just gonna go with auto key in the timeline there, pressing play, something like that. And I'm gonna smooth the keys, select keys, optimize. I think it's called optimized. Interpolation mode, handle type. It's not optimized. It's sorry. Where can I find this option? Decimate, yeah. Decimate was what I was looking for. I'm not on the right channel. Let's do that again. Decimate, we're using a ratio, it's going to be better. Just to remove a few keyframes here and there. And by the way, this is nice also. You can bake the sound to a curve. If you want to do motion design, it's super useful. Generates the curve according to the sound. But here, in order to add randomness, to be honest, like to randomly transform your keys, unless you go with the proportional editing with the noise, the random proportional editing there, and you have to have your slider big enough so it works up and down. I have no idea how to do it, to apply it to everything. Maybe, yeah, no. I know it will be easy to do in Python, a script that does that, but I have no idea. Yeah, I'm sorry about, like, I think the two ways that will come to my mind is like using a modifier and the proportional editing, and otherwise I will probably write a Python script for doing that. Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, I I think I'm gonna stop there. We didn't talk about UVs, but there are tons of stuff regarding UVs. Maybe the one tip I can share with you regarding UV that is quite neat is to download an add-on that's free called UV Square that I'm using a lot, and enable another add-on that is there by default in Blender called Magic UV. You can enable Magic UV that's inside Blender, this one. Let's say I'm adding a cut over there, mark sim, you unwrap. You're gonna see that in my UVs are not very nice here. That's kind of logical. I need to add that also. But you can see they are not square. Like this is not straight. So I enabled also an add-on called UV Square that's not available by default in Blender. You have to find it on GitHub. And this one enables you to do that to grid square. And boom, you have like perfectly aligned UVs, which is quite neat. Also in UVs, I don't know if you know, but this is a question I've been asked a lot. You have this button here in order to sync the viewport with the UVs. So now I don't have to select anything there. I can directly select, for instance, the geometry there, and I see, oh, this is this cut. And I can press Ctrl E over there, mark seam. It marked the seam. I can U and wrap it again, and you can see now it's working. I can also only select this piece of geometry. Only this piece, sorry. And here I can also unwrap it from there, basically. So here, if I go, but the thing that I don't understand why, by the way, is that with this option you're losing the island selection, which is quite useful. So the island enables you to have the access for the full island, and you're losing this in the live UV edit mode. And also, so let's make it back to a grid space. Here in Magic UVs, you have tons of stuff. You can align UVs, like you can do a lot of stuff. Basically, I really encourage you to take a look at it. You can pack stuff. Like for instance, here I can pack my UVs really quickly. You can also pack by default in Blender. Let's say you have. I'm gonna subdivide a lot. I'm gonna unwrap light map pack because this is the thing. I'm gonna make sure some stuff are out of the thing. I can select everything and press Ctrl P. Ctrl P, come on. Should be working. Ctrl P in Blender, or maybe they changed the shortcut. But actually, here I can press F3 in case I'm lost. Pack UV, and now it works. But apparently they've changed the shortcut. Pack UV. Where it is? I don't find them. I don't find the option. Pack UV. Oh, pack UV there. Yeah, they removed the shortcut. So I'm going to right click, assign a shortcut. Ctrl P was the original shortcut. So I'm going to bring it back. Ctrl P. And the neat thing with the pack is you also have here margin. So you can define the margin that you want to have. So basically the space. Okay. So there is this pack here inside. Yes, Text Tool is also a cool add-on that you can download for free. But honestly, without text, if I don't need to do some baking or some stuff like that inside Blender, which I usually don't do, Magic UV is good enough for what I have to do. So basically, alignment. You also have Magic UV in the viewport. So over there in the edit, you can copy paste UV, transfer UVs. You have, for instance, this is quite neat. Texture lock. Let me show you what it does. I'm just going to put a checker texture in the object that comes from the UV texture chord. Okay, going back to the layout, the UV, sorry, there. In material, I'm just going to re-unwrap this object. And I'm going to scale in the shading the thing like this. Okay, so let's say that I want to move this vertex. you know that if you're moving it, you're moving the UVs also, which is not good. So you know from the beginning of the live that if I want to be in this plane, I can select a plane basically, press Shift 7 to align my view into this view. So now when I move, I know I'm moving it on the plane, but you still see that my UVs are broken in this context. If I lock my object and I move, you see how Blender tries to approximate the UVs, which is quite neat. And if you look at, and if I unlock the object and go back, you can see it's probably there. It tries to compensate for the UVs. Okay, so that's a quite neat option. You also have the possibility to sculpt your UVs according to the geometry that you have. Quite nice too. But remember to disable and enable those options. Basically, you have a ton of options there that I really encourage you to go through. And I think we're good to go. Again, what I mentioned is that I have like many other things to share, but I think anything as an end, sorry. And I hope this was useful for you. Don't hesitate to watch the video back. This is going to stay on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I see you the next time. Cheers.